What would happen if your practice manager didn't come into work tomorrow? Not because she quit, not because she was terminated, and not because she did anything wrong. What if she had a medical emergency and suddenly couldn't come back? Not for just a day or two, for several weeks, possibly even months, with no handoff, no transition, no time to explain where everything was. Well, I worked with a practice recently where that actually happened. And by 10 a.m. that morning, everyone realized something very uncomfortable. The practice manager didn't just manage the practice, she held the keys to the castle. But she was a wonderful employee, loyal, dedicated, and definitely hardworking. The kind of person every physician owner hopes to have on the team. And she'd been with the practice for many years. I call this person the historian. She knew the practice inside and out. If someone had a question, they went to her. If something was missing, they asked her. If there was a problem, she usually knew how to solve it. And that was exactly the issue. Nobody realized how much knowledge lived with one person until she wasn't there. By mid morning, the questions started. Where's the doctor's DEA certificate? How do we get into PECOS? And how do we log into Availity? Where's the malpractice certificate? Who manages our website? Who knows when the provider contracts renew? We're very low on lidocaine. How do we get that order? When is payroll due and how do we even process it? At first, everyone assumed the information had to be somewhere. Maybe in a folder or in the email, maybe a shared drive. But no, the more they looked, the more obvious it became. The practice wasn't organized around a system, it was organized around a person. And then we discovered another layer. Her work computer had not been functioning well for a while. And like many busy practices, instead of stopping to fix the root problem, everyone found a workaround. She had started bringing her personal laptop to the office, and that personal laptop had quietly become part of the practice's daily operations. Documents were in there, notes, tracking spreadsheets, important login information, and reminders. Now that laptop was sitting at her home. Nobody was trying to do anything wrong. The practice manager was not really at fault. It's just that the team was simply trying to get through busy days and keep the practice moving. But over time, those small workarounds created a very fragile system. Once we started rebuilding the practice operating system truly from the ground up, another issue showed up almost immediately: two-factor authentication. So many of the systems we needed to access were tied to the manager's personal cell phone. A security code would be sent, but the phone was not at the office. It was her personal phone, and she was out on medical leave. That created a real problem. Not because anyone had done anything wrong, but because the practice had allowed critical access to be tied to just one person's personal device. And that is exactly why I recommend every practice have a dedicated manager cell phone, not someone's personal phone, not a phone that goes home with anyone either. A practice owned manager phone that just stays at the office. That phone can be used for two-factor authentication, vendor access, and practice-related logins. Because if your access codes are going to one person's personal cell phone, that person doesn't just hold the keys to the castle, their phone does too. And that is a risk most practices do not think about until they are locked out. And that is the real lesson. The problem was not the practice manager. And it wasn't that she had a medical emergency. It wasn't even the laptop that was the real problem. The problem was that the business had become dependent on just one person instead of a system. And before you think this could never happen in your practice, I want you to pause for a second. Who is the person that everyone goes to when they need an answer? Who knows where everything lives? Who remembers the deadlines? Who knows which payer portal is always a pain to access? And who understands the credentialing process? Who knows where all the documents are saved? And who knows how payroll gets processed? Who remembers which vendor to call when something breaks? Now, I guarantee that somebody just popped into your mind. And if they did, this video is for you. After working with medical practices for decades, I can tell you this usually does not happen because someone is trying to control information. It happens because they're actually capable. They solve problems. They know the answers. They are dependable. So little by little, more responsibility lands on their desk. A provider needs something. They handle it. A staff member can't find something. They find it. A deadline is coming up. They remember it. A portal login fails. They're the admin and they know the workaround. Before long, they become the keeper of everything. The keys to the castle end up hanging on one person's belt. The scary part is that nobody notices the risk while everything is working. As long as that person shows up every day, answers the questions, remembers the deadlines, and keeps solving problems, the practice feels like it's functioning. But there's a difference between functioning and being organized. A practice can look busy. It can look successful. It can even look like things are getting done. But if the entire operation depends on one person's memory, their inbox, a slew of sticky notes, and a personal laptop, that practice is vulnerable. And vulnerability gets expensive. It gets expensive when payroll is delayed. It gets expensive when credentialing deadlines get missed. And it gets expensive when the practice can't find a fee schedule. It gets expensive when nobody knows how to get into PECOS and process the Medicare revalidation application. It gets expensive when provider enrollment stalls because supporting documents are scattered. And it gets very expensive when the owner is pulled away from patient care to go searching for information that should have been easy to find. But one of the biggest misconceptions I see is that organization is an administrative issue. It isn't. It's actually a revenue issue. Because when the practice becomes organized, leadership finally gains visibility. You can see where patients might be falling through the cracks. You can see where the referrals are stalling. You can see where authorizations are delayed. And you can see where claims are being denied. And now you can also see why patients aren't coming in for their follow-up appointments. You can see where revenue is leaking out of the practice. So the goal isn't to create just a prettier system. The goal is to create a practice that operates efficiently enough to support growth. And that is one of the biggest hidden costs of disorganization. It doesn't just create frustration, it quietly limits revenue because a chaotic practice is usually leaving money on the table. And it's not because people don't care. It's because they are too busy surviving the day to see what's slipping through the cracks. Now, here's the good news. This story does have a happy ending. The practice recovered, but recovery wasn't immediate. We had to rebuild. We had to document all of the processes, identify where critical information lived. We had to centralize documents, and we had to organize all of the vendor information. We created visibility around recurring tasks and deadlines. In many ways, we were building a practice operating system from the ground up. And what surprised everyone was how much easier the practice became to manage once the information was no longer trapped inside one person's head. That is actually one of the gifts of a crisis. And I don't wish a crisis on anyone. But sometimes a crisis reveals what daily busyness has been hiding. And in this case, it revealed that the practice needed a better operating system, not just more effort, not more meetings, not more reminders, a real system, a shared place where important practice knowledge could live, a place where the team could find information without hunting someone down, and a place where recurring tasks had owners and where all documents were organized, a place where all of the processes could be followed by anyone, not just the person who handled them. And that is the way out. This is one of the reasons I am so passionate about helping practices become hyper organized, because organization is not about being neat. It's all about creating space, space to lead and delegate, to train, space to follow up, space to see your numbers, and space to find the revenue that is already sitting inside the practice. Inside Medical Practice Mastery, we teach practices how to build operational structure so the business does not depend on one person's memory. One of the tools I love for this is Trello. But I want to be really clear. This is not just about Trello. Trello is the tool. The real goal here is clarity. It's to create a true practice operating system. Imagine if every important area of the practice had a home: human resources, credentialing, provider documents, insurance contracts, vendor management, payroll, compliance, marketing, all of the policies and procedures, onboarding and training, facility management, on and on. Think of all of the things if they were just centralized, how much easier it would be to manage. Imagine if that DEA certificate or malpractice insurance certificate, payer contracts, supply ordering instructions, provider enrollment documents were not scattered across emails, sticky notes, personal laptops, binders, and maybe in someone's memory. Imagine if they all had a home. And that is when the practice starts to breathe differently. Because now the manager is not the only person who can answer every question. The owner does not have to search through old emails. The team does not have to interrupt the same person all day long. And new employees can be onboarded and trained faster. Tasks can be delegated more easily. Deadlines can be tracked. Projects can get managed. And when life happens, and it will, the practice is not thrown into chaos. And that is the transformation. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming resilient. So here's what I want you to do. Take out a piece of paper, write down the name of the person in your practice who seems to know everything. Then ask yourself, what would break if that person couldn't come to work tomorrow? Or more importantly, what would break if that person was out for several weeks? Every item on that list is a risk, but it's also an opportunity to document, to organize, to delegate, to create structure, to reduce risk, to protect your practice, to protect your people, and to uncover the revenue opportunities that get buried when everyone is too busy putting out fires. The goal is not to eliminate great people. The goal is to build systems so great people can thrive without carrying the entire practice on their shoulders. Because when one person holds all the keys to the castle, the practice is vulnerable. But when knowledge is shared, documented, and organized, the entire practice becomes stronger. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the channel, and in the description below, you'll find a link where you can join my weekly newsletter, Calm the Chaos. I send that out every Friday, and I share practical strategies to help medical practices reduce chaos, improve operations, strengthen their teams, increase revenue, and create a better experience for patients and staff. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.